Welcome to Fast Politics, Kurt Andersen.
Happy to be in fast politics once again.
Every day is a greater descent into Fantasyland. I mean, it is the myths, and also everything is 1994 forever and ever until we die.
Well,
Discuss.
I would give anything for it to be 1994 again. Boy, it certainly is the beginnings of Newt Gingrich and the descent of the Republican Party into the morass of the last 30 years. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, Fantasyland, and as long as we're talking about titles of my books, Evil Geniuses, which came afterwards, I really thought of them both as a double volume. The first one being, yes, this long-standing American weakness for the citingly untrue, right? And Donald Trump has embodied that. He came along just as I was finishing that book, and it was like, I felt some guilt, like, oh, I have my poster boy here for this book. But he is so that, and it was published in his first year, and the week after it was published, QAnon started, and then there's Donald Trump lying about everything and building this movement, this true movement. You can't understate that, of people who share, not a coherent ideology. That's the thing, right? It's interesting. They share all kinds of fantasies and conspiracy theories, and the Bobby Kennedy flavor, and the government is taking over this or that, and just the inconsistency and incoherence of it all is phenomenal. And people keep saying, "Oh, you should update it, write a new one." Well, no, it's just there. It is. I mean, I could devote my entire life to doing a daily thing about it. No, it's nuts, and I don't know what to say. I keep waiting for enough people to have sense slapped into them. And I think, as I talk about in Fantasyland, when the economics go wrong, as they did in 2008, right? You can't pretend there's not a giant Great Recession. You can't pretend prices aren't going up. You can't pretend the economy is now starting to go into recession. So that there is the reality slap of economic reality, which at this point, I guess I'm depending on, because in political terms, because he can't wish that away. They can't wish that away. And just as, not to compare it to Joe Biden, but just as the Biden administration, Democrats couldn't say, "Oh no, the inflation's really, yeah, it's going away. It's okay. You're not feeling it." Well, people didn't buy that, and they're not going to buy this. And more than ever, again, my hope, I always find the glimmers of hope in green shoots. This is so clearly and so undeniably his. He still occasionally tries to say, "Oh no, it's Biden did it. I inherited Biden." No, you didn't. Tariffs are yours. All of it's yours. This radical change in the labor market, apart from the grotesque street thug fascism of the mass deportations, all of it is gonna be his. I mean, I was already hopeful about the midterms, and the timing of the economic wreckage looks just great for, politically speaking. A year from now, it's be terrible. So that's my feeling. But the as you said, as you're framing the descent into Fantasyland, and the degree to which the evil geniuses, which is to say rich people and corporate
Right.
heads by and large, and the elected Republicans in Washington, have all, as we know, 96% of them absolutely bought in. And, and I hope there will be a price to pay, because, and I think there will be, and I think this is not gonna last forever anymore. I say to myself, not often in public, any more than it did in Germany. We just gotta keep, as nearly as we can, shouting the truth in, non-hair on fire, but it's extreme and it's not normal, and what it's going to take all kinds of new things, whether it's letting the government shut down in a couple of weeks, or whatever it is. It's a new ball game. It's a new ball game. So
Yeah.
that's what I have to say.
I'd love you to talk about the birthday book, because the birthday book feels like something that, I mean, it can't, it was put together in the 90s, early 2000s, right before Epstein's first arrest, right? When he got the sweetheart deal, which was 2004. But it exists in this time. I mean, what I think is so interesting about what I've seen of it so far is that there's stuff from Trump, there's stuff from Les Wexler, there's stuff from Dershowitz. It feels like another world, you know?
It does, and I said to my wife yesterday, boy, there was this parallel dirty rich universe going on in our midst, and we were just, Pollyanna innocence. Yes, it does feel like another world, but I don't think it is another world. I think that world exists in different form right now, and it will, if, well, sooner or later it will be exposed too. No, I don't. It is of another time because of the names, and Les
Right.
Westminster and Alan Dershowitz and all the rest are, no, everybody except Donald Trump are gone, more or less. The entitlement and is still absolutely there, and I still see that. I mean, and I would say, I mean, obviously, the great wealth and I can do anything because I'm rich thing is here more than ever, and I see not Epstein sex trafficking examples of it all over all the time, but similar things. It's just as grotesque. The thing about that too, I mean, again, in terms of just the delusional Orwellian fantasy, the denial yesterday by the deputy White House chief of staff in charge of comms and by the press secretary of like, no, look, these signatures obviously aren't his. Well, they look just like the
Yeah.
ones you were showing, and they look just like the ones I have in my personal files from Donald Trump, first of all. And then the Wall Street Journal, which in its they did a
Owned
fantastic
by famous
sidebar.
liberal,
Well,
famous
yeah,
liberal,
exactly. I mean, it is
Rupert
fantastic
Murdoch.
sidebar analyzing why the signature looks is the same. Why, yes, he looked at all these drawings he's done. Yes, look at all the times he's used Enigma and all. It's just like boom, 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 like this forensic spy magazine like takedown that is fantastic. Good for
Yeah.
Rupert Murdoch in his
Yeah.
last days alive.
Yeah. As
Um,
he ruined the country, but he's getting his last licks in at Donald
Something like
Trump.
that.
So
But
that's
anyway, so
something.
and again, and what's her name? Carolyn Levitt said, "No, and the Wall Street Journal story proves this has all been false." No, it proves the opposite. So anyway, it's remarkable, and I remember, speaking of the '90s, I don't know, you may be too young to remember Baghdad Bob during the Iraq
Yeah.
War, but like
That's what
this
this is
guy who
like
was
for
the
sure.
the the embodiment of like, no, they're not the Americans are nowhere near. We're fine. We're good.
That's right.
We'll see. I mean, and again, the you can't make it up daily thing of like, oh, we're gonna make Eric Adams, mayor of New York, get out of the way for Andrew Cuomo by making him the ambassador to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I
Yeah.
mean,
Amazing.
yeah, and
Amazing.
man, that would be a great reality show, yes. But it is astonishing, and, no, and
So
as I say, I
so
look for
let's
glimmers of hope. The Mamdani thing is a glimmer of
yeah,
hope.
but I wanna stay on this idea that the world that we're living in right now was created in the 90s because I actually think it was. A lot of the people who are funding this presidency
Good.
or running this White House are creatures of that world. And I think of like Susie Wild, who came up under Bush too. Donald Trump, obviously, most of his friends and the people around him. And I just wonder if the thing that made Trump and the thing I was talking to someone who knew him and had talked to him pretty recently and said that one of the things he spends the most time worrying about is this breaking through? Like, are people watching me? Are people seeing me? Are people right? Am I getting the airtime? Is it being shown now because
What are
he's
my
old?
ratings? Yeah.
Right. He's still thinking about like traditional linear television and not necessarily where a lot of people are. But I think that, he was at the US Open yesterday. He is he is trying to be at every sporting event. He wants to have USC fighters on the lawn of the White House. And I just wonder if you could talk about this idea of being downstream of culture and how Donald Trump learned that and how that equates to the 90s.
Well, he was and is a show business person, right?
Right.
When he got into real estate, he said, "Oh, I 60 years ago, more than 6 years ago," he said, "I was thinking about getting into show business and producing Broadway plays and stuff, but I'm gonna be in real estate and make that show business too." And and as I've written about, it was in this long, perfectly calibrated, timed way to do what has always been done in America, which is everything is show business. I mean,
Right.
religion was show business in the United States or in America before it was the United States, unlike anywhere else. And everything, and Buffalo Bill, all of it was show business. And presidential politics had started that becoming that with television, and then Ronald Reagan, and then mm, up to Donald Trump, and he was perfectly positioned to do that. And so, being a WWE famous guy before he was, I mean, that was as important a part of his fame in the 1990s as anything else. Then came Apprentice and everything, and playing this character against that rival evil character, and just doing whatever it took to make people watch and cheer and like, okay, they know it's a fake, but like, well, we still like it.
Right.
And to make our politics, at least our Republican politics, at least his unique and singular version of politics, that was, I mean, it's like a wild movie, a piece of satire, a Mike Judge idiocracy thing
Right.
that a novel I wrote in 1999 about the merger of reality and television. And it's just come true. So yes, the seeds were absolutely laid there. And of course, a lot of these people too, just because of their age, because they're, the 90s people were still young enough to now be in positions of power. But so many of these people, of course, were not in politics at all. I mean, Bobby Kennedy in the 90s was still, a drug addict and a failed district attorney who had then become apparently a legit environmental lawyer and stuff. But yeah, I mean, but again, why is he there? Because his last name is Kennedy, period, end of story. And
Right.
why is our public health system being destroyed? And years and years of important, all kinds of medical and other scientific work being destroyed because this kid, my cocaine dealer's name is Kennedy. And again, it's this crazy, celebrity tail wagging the dog of the republic in a way that, yes, it begs all understanding.
Right. There is an attention to brands, an attention to names that is very Trumpian. Right. I
Yeah.
also think that RFK, that was the way he appealed to women voters, was that he saw that they were Trump friendly women voters who liked Maha and who thought Maha was somehow something that would solve their problems. And I think there is also a sort of post-COVID emotional meltdown that has happened in our country that
Well,
is
there's all the yes,
clearly.
I couldn't agree more. The
Yeah,
COVID, I think the effects, obvious and less obvious of COVID are still with us and
yeah,
messing with us in all kinds of
and
ways. In the
and you
Maha,
don't have Maha without COVID.
absolutely, and, speaking of Maha, and almost everyone I know says, "Well, there's a lot of things about Earth. There are some things about Bobby Kennedy. Yes, he's a nut. Yes, he's this. Yes, he's destroying science. But there's things he says that if you just did those, whatever,
Right.
taking chemicals out of food, taking prescription pharmaceutical ads off television, on and on. There are things like, yeah, sure, if that's Maha, I'm down with it. Until you get into no, all vaccines are bad, and I should be able to not take vaccines if I want and all that. Until you get into the craziness, there's, sane Maha and simply like California, you know, healthiness and then there's insanity. And you I think it's important to distinguish those and make the people who were attracted to the,
Right.
reasonable part of it, like understand like this guy is is
I mean,
gonna make your
w
kids die and
right.
make your parents die.
I mean, the best example of the Maha craziness is Florida, where they're no longer, making kids get vaccinated. I
Yeah.
mean, that is an
We'll
insane.
see, and again, it takes a while, the immune herd has protected everybody for so long, they forget if they ever knew or ever understood that that's why people didn't get all these horrible, deadly
We're
childhood.
gonna see bad, bad stuff happen real soon. Do you think, like, one of the things that I often think to myself is, like, we are actually hurtling towards disaster pretty quickly?
And the question is which disaster or disasters are we hurtling toward?
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know how quickly, but, and I don't like it, it's like one of these numbers is going to come up. And whether it's unnecessarily uncontrolled epidemics, well, God knows. I don't need to.
Right. Who it doesn't matter, but you can see that we're hurtling towards something bad. The
Yes.
lack of regulation when it comes to stablecoin, the the disassembling our security. I mean, like clearly something catastrophic is we're hurtling towards.
Well, it's a reasonable bet, unfortunately. I think it is. Lenin famously said in his, the worse the better, you get things
Right.
terrible and then the revolution will come. I've never been that.
Yeah.
But this is not going to end well. It just is not going to end well. I hope, whatever disaster comes, it's not so existential that it can't be recovered from.
The thing that I am so struck by is like we have government is good and does things for people, and disassembling it is bad, and we're about to find out why.
Yes, and you can still stipulate that, yes, of course, there's lots of bloated, old-fashioned, inefficient things. Yes, 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 yes. I mean, again, there are reasonable versions of everything. Just as there are reasonable versions of Maha, there's a reasonable version of a Doge thing. Like, yeah,
Right.
let's see what isn't doing its job anymore. And let's not just assume that the most regulation is the better or all of it. But, I mean, the crazy binariness, and here we are way over here, like, in the real burn it down sense. And that nihilism, the burn it down nihilism is a significant part of the Trump base movement feeling, just fuck it. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Burn it down.
Yep.
It's not working. It's rigged. And that's a dangerous fact.
Kurt Andersen, please come back.
Always willing and always happy too.